It's good to see you, Suzanne.
It's good
I,
to see you. How are you?
I just sent you an email.
I saw that. Yes, I plan to have the new bookkeeper do that on Monday.
Okay, because I looked at I was checking my checkbook this week, and I'm thinking, that check from October is still outstanding. And someone else came in today and said, Skip Becker, my check hasn't been cashed yet. So he had checked it out, and in the box were all these checks and this money.
Yeah. October got a little busy.
Uh, yeah, just wanted you to
How are
know that
you?
it's there, and it would be
Muki.
nice that we could take care of our checkbooks. Hi, Muki.
Hello.
Hi, Muki.
Good afternoon to all of you.
Good to see you. Very good.
It's afternoon.
Yeah, here it is definitely night.
Is it 11? What time is it?
It's almost 11. It's 10:53 right now. Yeah.
I can't. We're looking forward to your
It's lovely. One of the things that's been happening with the Zooms is, I've done a few Zooms, and for me, that just to see the familiar faces is very encouraging part of it. Obviously sharing the story and feeling people's interest and hopefully imparting some information, but seeing the familiar faces is always a good thing.
Fortunately, all of us who were there in January are still around today. So
Good.
for us, it's been a relatively good year.
Good. I can't decide what's the temperature like where you guys are? I can't decide if I'm hot or cold.
50 and rainy-ish.
Oh, no, we are, I have to do the maths.
It's relatively warm for Ohio this time of year.
And we've actually also been warm. I'm just during the day today was very hot. Well, very hot was like 70.
It was
Something
almost
like that.
2 months since we saw that.
We love it.
Well, no worries. It's going to get down to 30 in the middle of this week. So
No,
winter is coming back.
Winter will be
right
here.
now it's 69 at 11 p.m.
So, we won't see that for a long time. Earlier in the week, or was it last week? It was down to 19.
Yeah. It was snowing.
Yeah.
It wasn't bad.
It's I'll relate to a bit later on, in the session, but even the weather becomes a factor now that we're at war.
Yes.
How does that impact on the front? How does that impact on the agriculture that many of us are doing, volunteering in agriculture? So even something as banal as the weather becomes a concern. So just one second.
The soldiers all at work, who is taking care of the commerce and the agriculture and all the other things that need to be, the street cleaning and the garbage pickup and stuff?
Well, commerce is continuing at a reduced rate. Supermarkets are doing business. People are not really in the mood for going to the mall. And agriculture is mostly volunteer work. It's something I'll relate to a little bit in the session. So I just I have a cat. I have cat food on the shelf, on the bookshelf, because if it's on the floor, the dog eats it, and the cat is very insistent on entering and leaving the room, as you know, on cat time. So if I have to, for 1 second, be distracted, it's to let the cat out. One of the things that again I'll relate to it a bit later on when everyone is here, but we we adopted a dog, a displaced dog from the south.
Mm, mm.
We can't leave any cat food at ground level because the traumatized dog will eat it. So again, the little impacts that that this has.
Oh.
Suzanne, did you give me the ability to share screen?
Yes, I did.
You did. You did. Excellent. Thank you.
Was Rabbi going to join us?
I think so.
Okay.
Um,
the actors just go way there, like wee, and sometimes I hear a wee. And sometimes the chair, early on in previews, the chairs kind of decided it was going to be like, not today.
Special.
Hmm?
Is it anybody special?
It said United States on it.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna put us on mute.
You have any idea how many of us signed up?
I had about 22 signed up.
Okay. Hope you're feeling better, Wendy. We missed you this morning.
Thank you. Yeah, I am feeling better.
Oh no, have you been sick?
I woke up this morning and just was like kind of dizzy and couldn't get it to stop. So
Oh.
I thought that maybe driving and standing up for any length of time was a bad plan. And then a few hours later it was better. So if we want to redo it now, I'll come and slice tomatoes and onions.
You were missed. You were missed.
Thank you. I really wanted to be there. It looked like it was going to be a very good lecture.
Yes, it was. It was very enjoyable.
I'm glad you're better.
Thank you so much. I'm trying to figure out how I can see more people. I'm doing this on my iPad for the first time. So
Yeah, I always have trouble on my iPad. That's why I come up to the computer so I can see everybody's face.
yeah, I can only see I can see 8 windows.
Yeah, I used to do it on my phone. It's like, no, it didn't work.
Ah, I see. If I slide sideways, I can see more people and yet more people, but not all at once, unfortunately.
If you click on gallery, I think you can see a lot more, at least in mine.
Yeah, I think it's the limitations of the screen size of the iPad that
Oh,
will
you've
only
got the
show
iPad. Ah, okay.
can only show like eight at a time. It might be more if I turn it sideways, but I don't really want the camera on the side.
Yeah.
Hey, Rabbi, I enjoyed seeing your nephew last night on TV.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was really cool.
It really was.
Definitely.
Sent
We
me some
recorded it.
pictures.
We haven't watched it yet. So we're looking forward to it.
He says he hasn't slept in 2 days, but the after party went all night.
I bet it
Oh my
did.
gosh. Right.
I can't wait to hear what famous people he got to hang out with.
Oh,
So,
yeah. When you find out, let us know. It was like 6 degrees of separation here.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I tried to watch and then I was like, Wait, I see guitarists on the right side, not the left, and
Yeah, no, he was on the left. The guy on the right is actually someone from Iraq
Wow.
Really?
named Alex, I believe.
and then I'm not sure I stayed on long enough, so
It's all good. They always do like the end, towards the end of the skits and stuff is when they do all the music. So,
yeah.
Yeah, that's why we haven't watched any of it, because there's no way I can't even stay up for the beginning of it, much less the whole show.
I think it looked like Noah Khan was very nervous on the first song. The second song was much better.
Oh.
I don't blame him.
He had to get warmed up.
Yeah.
Hey, it's someone's birthday
Yeah,
today,
It was
isn't it?
really nice of you to join us on your birthday, Rabbi Karen.
Yeah.
It is my pleasure.
Yeah.
I'm glad that we can do
I
this. This
think
is a
we should
birthday
all
present.
sing.
We've been excited to have Muki, and I'm here with Jonah too. He doesn't want to be on camera, but he's
Are
excited.
you going to lead us in singing, Rich? Is that what you're
No,
telling
no, you
Please
should.
don't.
You don't want me to sing. That would be a bad present.
Well, we are sending you our most heartfelt birthday wishes.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So glad you're with us for your birthday.
And just for fun, I will put into the chat if I can. My nephew did send me a couple pictures by their official photographer.
Oh, that's cool.
Very cool.
So are we waiting for anyone?
I think we can get started. They're not on time. They're not on time.
Okay, so I'm going to start.
I think Suzanne was going to introduce you.
Okay.
I was.
That's
Please.
your email said to me.
I just opened the meeting. You can introduce.
So, well, fortunately, I think most of us have had the wonderful opportunity of learning with Muki already. Those of you who haven't are in for a treat. Muki, if you want to see his resume, you can, because it's online. But all I can tell you is that of all the guides I've had, Muki has been the best. And we've loved learning from him in Israel and also stateside during COVID. And especially right now with so much happening in Israel, to be able to get his perspective and really to feel like we're connected in a special way is really neat for us. And just to know that you're okay, Muki. It's good just to see you too. So, but
It's great to be here and to see so many familiar faces.
Yeah. So you can start. I didn't mean to keep going.
Okay, so if I can ask people to mute, because sooner or later someone forgets that they're if they're not muted, and then and I'm going to share the screen. And hang on. Okay, so can you see that? Yeah, we got the screen. Can someone give me the thumbs up? That you can,
told us to mute, but yes, we can see it.
Yeah, the thumbs up is good as well. Okay, excellent. So there is a name for the operation, but it hasn't really taken in Israel. You know, we talk about the 6-Day War from 67 or the Yom Kippur War from 73, and this is I don't know if it's going to end up being called the Simchat Torah or the Black Sabbath, Shabbat HaShachor. I don't know if it yet has a name, but it's definitely in the category of a war, like 67, like 73, like 48, and not in the category of an operation. I've lived through many rounds of conflict with Lebanon or with Gaza, but nothing on the scale of this event. I'm not today going to be giving you military nitty-gritty. That's not, this is more of a background piece than, you know, what's happening right now. And frankly, the army has been very good about only giving us facts after the fact, because we know all too well that Hamas are listening to Israeli media as well, and we don't need them to know anything until it's relevant. Indeed, the army spokesman does give updates, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day, but it's very typically about things that have happened in the past and not something that's happening right now. Early in the morning of Simchat Torah, I was awake, I was reading, and it was warm. So I opened the door to our sukkah to let some cool air from the sukkah come into the house. I didn't actually go out and sit in the sukkah. I opened the door and I started hearing distant boom, boom, boom. Not one, not twice, but over and over and over. So it sounded like missiles, but there were too many to make it really sound like missiles. So sort of dismissed it. And then there was more, and then there was more. Looked at my phone, nothing. Put on the TV, nothing. It would take a few minutes until there started being reports, and even then the reports had no sense of the scale of the event that took place. The one picture that you see is of some of the missiles coming across from Gaza. But the other picture that you see is of an apartment building in Tel Aviv that was hit. A colleague of mine, a guide, lives in that apartment building. So if I woke up that day, that morning, to the sound of different distant missiles, he woke up that morning to the sound of his building being hit by missiles. That's the level of surprise that we all had. How do we get there? We're going to go back, all the way back to just a few days ago, the 29th of November, 1947, when the country is partitioned by the United Nations into 2 states, a Jewish state and an Arab state. The Jewish state you see marked in blue, the Arab state you see marked in pink. Nobody's calling themselves yet Palestinian. Nobody's calling themselves yet Israel. Palestine is divided into a Jewish state and an Arab state. And Ben-Gurion decides to call the Jewish state Israel. The Arabs don't decide to call their state anything because the state doesn't come into being because the area is invaded by the surrounding countries. So Transjordan takes this area over here, which is called Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank, because it is the West Bank of the Jordan River. And Egypt takes this strip of land over here, which is called the Gaza Strip. We can see on this map the Gaza Strip over there and the West Bank over here. Some of the other areas come under complete Israeli control. That's the situation from 1948 until 1967. In 1967, in the war, Israel takes control of the Gaza Strip, of the West Bank, and of the Golan Heights. And after that, a paradigm comes into being, which is called land for peace. Now, it should be clear that from the get-go, there is an Arab maximal position, which is, it's all ours. There is no space for a Jewish state. And there is also a Jewish maximal position. It's all ours. There is no space for an Arab state. The majority of people in Israel are prepared to consider what's called the 2-state solution, that some of the land will be part of a Jewish state and some of the land will be part of an Arab state. That is the paradigm of the moderates. It doesn't get much traction until the until the Oslo Accords. The Oslo Accords signed during the time of the Clinton administration start a process of dividing the land up into these two different states. Now, the opponents of this on both sides, the people with the maximal position, are not happy about the Oslo Agreement, because the Oslo Agreement seeks to put to an end the idea of it's all mine, and instead seeks to create two parallel states. Now, the problem is that there is very little trust between Israel, led at the time by Yitzhak Rabin and later on Shimon Peres and Yasser Arafat. But there is a structure in place to create two different states. And that structure is called the Oslo process. Excuse me. The Oslo process sets out to divide the West Bank and Gaza into three different areas. Areas called A, which is autonomous Arab-ruled areas, marked on the map in red, and also the Gaza Strip, which we don't see just yet, but we'll be focusing on going forward. Area B, which is in between. By the way, this is my shorthand. A, B, and C are not called autonomous balagan or controlled in the Oslo arrangement. A is area under full Palestinian control. B is area where Palestinians control everything but security. And C is areas under full Israeli control. The idea being that this is an interim stage. By the way, the Gaza Strip, which is down at the bottom of the map, and we'll see it in a second on a better map, is also almost all Area A. The idea being to reduce friction between Jews and Arabs, to allow Arab self-rule in those areas that are underneath Arab demographic, the big urban areas, and eventually that this will become some kind of self-governing Arab area. Within Palestinian society, there, of course, are the maximalists who don't want to have this compromise, because this compromise of sharing the land with the Jews, this compromise of sharing the land, is something that is anathema to them. So we're focusing in on the Gaza Strip, and I want to, we'll continue to talk about the historical process, but I just want to take one step back and to talk about the geography of the Gaza Strip. So when you see the Gaza Strip, notice there are areas marked in brown, which are urban areas, and there are areas marked in white, which are rural areas or undeveloped areas. There is a common misnomer that is going around in your media, in the media in general, that talks about the densely populated Gaza Strip. That's a myth. If you Google, don't trust me, trust Google. If you Google population density in Gaza and compare it to any of the boroughs of New York City, I think Staten Island might be less densely populated, but all of the others are more densely populated. And if you look at any of the arrondissements of Paris, you come up with the exact same thing. Now, in the urban areas in Gaza, there is dense population, but in the Gaza Strip as a whole, there is open space. So the choice by Hamas to place its forces not in the open areas, but instead to fight, as we'll talk about in a little bit, from underneath the densely populated urban areas, is a decision, a military decision made by Hamas. You'll notice also that Hamas is bordered on the west by the Mediterranean Sea, and that it is bordered in the north and in the east by Israel. But you will also see that it is bordered in the south by Egypt. Along the border over here, that's a border with Egypt. Again, one of the things that you hear in the media is that the Gaza Strip has been under Israeli siege for the last 10 years. Well, firstly, it wasn't only under Israeli siege, if it was under siege, because it shares one of its borders with Gaza. But secondly, as we have seen from the amount of missiles, anti-tank missiles, drones, and other military hardware, it wasn't much of a siege. If this is, if this is the kind of material that could have been brought in. Just for a sense of scale, the whole area of the Gaza Strip is about 141 square miles. So it is not an enormous area, but and a population of somewhere in the vicinity of 2 million people. In this picture, there are two different Palestinian leaders. The deal that Israel makes with Arafat, the Oslo process, is with an organization which is the core of which is the PLO, but which becomes known as the Palestinian Authority, led by Mahmoud Abbas, the man that you can see in the picture at the top. Abbas, who is currently in either the 16th or 17th year of his 4-year term, was elected to be the ruler of the Palestinian Authority at the time when the authority was both Gaza and the West Bank. There was a coup, a military overthrow in Gaza, and Gaza comes under the control of another organization called Hamas. And we're going to be focusing in on Hamas right now. Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of Hamas that you see in the lower picture, is a leader in exile. He is in Qatar. He is not the leader on the ground in Gaza. But you have two different Palestinian entities, one in Gaza and one in the West Bank. There are people in Gaza who support the PA. There are people in the West Bank who support Hamas. But in terms of who is in control in each of those two different areas, we have the PA in the West Bank and we have Hamas in the Gaza Strip. The kind of gallows humor comment in Israel was 3 states for 2 peoples. We'd have a Jewish state in Israel, and then there would be a Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and Hamas, who are Islamist. Long before we started seeing Hamas behaving like ISIS, they were, in their worldview, Islamist. In fact, their PA, Palestinian Authority, talks about Palestine, but Hamas doesn't talk about Palestine, talks about Muslim. It has a Muslim view of what it's trying to do. And indeed, let's take a closer look at Hamas. We see the symbol of Hamas, and of course, at the top of the screen, you can see the Golden Dome in Jerusalem, which is the central shrine of Palestinian Arabs in general, but which is, of course, a very, very Muslim symbol. Now, Hamas have a charter. In fact, they had a charter and it was updated. So if you want to read the whole Hamas charter, make sure you get the new charter, the new and much more moderate, so we're told, charter than the old charter of Hamas. Not the 1980s one, but the one from the teens of the 2000s. But I'll bring you just 2 of the articles in the Hamas Charter. Hamas believes that no part of the land of Palestine shall be compromised or conceded. irrespective of the causes, the circumstances, and the pressures, and no matter how long the occupation lasts. Hamas rejects any alternative to the full and complete liberation of Palestine from the river to the sea. Now, that term, from the river to the sea, has kind of become quite popular now, and we hear people on campuses and people in other places chanting from the river to the sea. That means this is not about the Gaza Strip. This is not about the West Bank. That means my home in Modi'in, or in Herzliya, or in Tzfat, or in Tiberias, or in Beersheba, or in Eilat, anywhere else in this country, we are settlers too. And Hamas will not compromise or concede on controlling all of that area. Another line from their charter: resisting the occupation with all means and methods is a legitimate right guaranteed by divine laws and by international norms and laws. At the heart of this lies armed resistance, which is regarded as the strategic choice for protecting the principles and the rights of the Palestinian people. There are other, even more violent clauses in the charter, and they also are quite clear that this is not just about me, but it's about you too. It's not only about Jews or Israelis, but it's about Jews in general. Now, Hamas has not changed or softened these clauses in their charter in any way. They have had them all along. One of the problems that Israel had, one of the flaws in Israeli thinking, is that we operated under a concept that Hamas had moderated, that they're being in control in Gaza, meaning they had to deliver the garbage, and rather collect the garbage and deliver school services and deliver welfare services, would have made them moderate. And of course, that, as we discovered, if there was any doubt that they had changed on the 7th of October, it was made very clear that they have not. Now, what you can see is a map which shows the range of missiles in use in the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip is the little white strip that you see at the bottom of your screen over here. And then we have bands of territory around the Gaza Strip, which could be reached by different missiles. The first band can be reached even by mortars, which have almost no time to seek shelter or to find a solution. And then strip by strip, area by area, we see further and further range of missiles. Because the area from the green, you already have a minute or more to get to your shelter. Where I live in Modi'in, we have 90 seconds to get to our shelter. As you can see, Hamas is able to cover almost all of the country with its missiles. And what we had gotten used to is that Hamas would initially bomb and shell the kibbutzim and the small towns just around the Gaza Strip. And then we would have an occasional escalation where they fired further and further afield. But the sense was that Israel could contain Gaza, could contain Hamas. And although some of you were with me when we met Chen and met people who lived right on the edge of Gaza, and they shared with us the trauma of never knowing when they were going to be shelled again, the government felt that that Hamas were contained, and occasionally they let off steam by firing a few missiles, and mostly we had warning and we could live with it. Indeed, once Israel develops something called Iron Dome, which is an anti-missile missile, which has a success rate in the mid-90s, it became even more acceptable to say that we can live with Hamas and the missiles, because between the Iron Dome and the fact that we have shelters in our homes, life can go on. And indeed, in the previous rounds of the conflict, very few Israelis were hurt and injured. There were always some hurt and even killed, but it was deemed an almost bad luck. There was this accommodation of living alongside Gaza. There is an economic aspect to it, that the Hamas missiles were made from plumbing pipe, iron pipe that was delivered by the world to increase the standard of living in the Gaza Strip, and Hamas could convert them in a basement workshop into missiles that were not very accurate missiles, but they could terrorize the first couple of areas around the Gaza Strip. Israel could intervene with Iron Dome. Each Iron Dome missile costs tens of thousands of dollars. So there is an economic piece to the struggle with the primitive Hamas technology. But the truth is that we mostly succeeded, and the missiles were not seen to be a threat, except perhaps for some of the small settlements around the Gaza Strip. And I believe that the commonly accepted sense now is that the government's mistake, or one of many mistakes of the government, is that it got used to allowing people to live in a situation where they got shelled from time to time. But as their Iron Dome succeeded in stopping the influx of missiles, Hamas came up with a new tactic, and that new tactic was tunnels. Most of the Gaza Strip is sand. The beaches extended inland for several miles as one goes further and further south, and it's very, very easy to dig through, to put a very primitive tunnel in place, although sometimes these tunnels are wide enough certainly to drive a motorcycle, and in some places even to drive a pickup truck through. Initially, Hamas builds these tunnels to come into Israel, to launch an attack on Israel. And indeed, there is evidence that the kind of attack that we experienced on the 7th of October was planned by Hamas a decade ago, where their plan was that they would come out in tunnels very, very close to a kibbutz and come in and do the kind of thing that we saw happen on the 7th of October already back then. Israel discovers the tunnels, understands the tunnels, is able to find the tunnels and the incoming attack tunnels. We wait till they get to the border, and then Israel either pumps them full of cement or blows them up, and the attack tunnels became much less of a problem, although we know that Hamas has invested hundreds of millions of dollars in building this massive underground city under Gaza. When the missiles were not doing their job, when the tunnels as an attack tool were not doing their job, Hamas went to a very primitive system of using balloons. And in the summer, they would attach to the bottom of a clump of balloons a smoldering incendiary device. They would release it. The sea breeze would carry it over. And when it came down, that incendiary device would catch the wheat fields or the forests or whatever it landed on, would catch it on fire and would burn. And they also attached explosive devices that would come over and would explode perhaps when a child saw the balloons and went running over to the balloons. So these are the kind of things that Hamas was doing. But again, we had very good defense. We had a fence with sensors. We had cameras all the way along. We had balloons in the air looking over and into the West Bank. We had an underground wall that blocked off any tunnels. We had sensors in the ground that could find and feel if they were trying to dig something to go even below the underground wall. And we felt confident. Now, I'll remind everyone that the year is 2023. And we have spent most of this last year commemorating the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War. The Yom Kippur War that until this moment was the most devastating war that Israel faced. And there have been documentaries and panels and in-service training for guides and for teachers. And the theme of the Yom Kippur War was discussed at length. And one of the principal lessons of the Yom Kippur War was a failed concept. The understanding that Egypt and Syria were deterred by their losing the 67 war, and that they were not in a situation to attack us. Israel operates in 2023 under a similar concept. The concept that Hamas are deterred, that Hamas have become the responsible adult, they need to rule Gaza, and they're not going to attack. Of course, as we know, this was not the case. Indeed, Hamas had been operating willfully, deceitfully. We had a round of violence a few months ago when the Islamic Jihad was firing on Israel, and Hamas kind of reined them in. Of course, all part of a deceit. They were in cahoots. Hamas knew exactly what was going on. They were testing and checking and trying to understand and getting ready for the moment. When the moment comes, it is attack from the sea, from the air, and over land in 28 different points. Trained Hamas soldiers coming across in motorcycles, coming across in pickup trucks, coming across with enough weapons, ammunition, and food to keep going for a month. Now, it was a devastating day. It was the bloodiest day in Israel's history. 5% of the casualties that have fallen in all of the Israel-Arab wars dating back to the beginning of Zionism fell on the 7th of October, on a single day. This is a very small country physically. It is also a very small country demographically. Everyone knows someone. If they don't know the person personally, they know someone who knows the person personally. There's no third or fourth levels of separation. It's a second level of separation. All people knew exactly people that were directly affected, killed, injured, or the hundreds of thousands of people that are refugees in Israel, that's homes have been displaced, that have been displaced from their homes by this attack. Like ISIS, many of the Hamas terrorists that came across were using amphetamines, Captagon. They had very clear targets. Each group had a different target, this kibbutz or that kibbutz, this town or that town. They attacked a lot of civilians, not only military targets, overwhelmingly civilian targets. They killed children. There was a great deal of sexual crime, rape, and dismemberment of women. There was indiscriminate killing of foreign workers who were working on some of the kibbutzim, be they from Thailand, Nepal, Tanzania, wherever people happened to be from. It made no difference that the Hamas attack was overwhelming. And if I said that in 1973 it was an existentially significant moment for Israel, that were we to be overrun by the Egyptian and Syrian armies, this is 3,000 people. And yet it felt existential. It felt existential because A, they didn't operate like an army. They didn't attack military targets. They attacked civilian targets and were relentless in their pursuing of and killing of ordinary civilians, civilians that had themselves kept in their secure rooms in their home bomb shelters. They burnt the house down on top of them, or they blew the shelter open to take the people out and either take them hostage or kill them. But it felt existential because I live in the city of Modi'in. My home is in distance closer to the West Bank than all of the kibbutzim that were attacked are to the Gaza Strip. In other words, if every Israeli who lives within a few miles of a border is not safe to live there, doesn't feel comfortable to raise their children there, what does that mean about our having a state? So on that level, the moment felt very, very significant. I'm going to zoom out just for a moment to European capitals and American cities and campuses where there is an support for Gaza. And I want to make a significant point. This is not a war between Israel and Gaza. This is a war between Israel and Hamas, ISIS. Now, surveys at the moment show that there is large, widespread support in Gaza for Hamas. Surveys in non-democratic, violent dictatorships are very inaccurate. We don't know how many people actually support Hamas or not. But either way, Israel's war is with the jihadist group Hamas, the group that wants to destroy Israel. But if we take a closer look at some of the posters at the demonstration, we get a sense of what we're up against. And this is not coming as a surprise to you. Many of the people on the street are not supporting a two-state solution, are not supporting the existence of an Arab state, because there are still, I would actually argue, there are probably more Israelis now after this war that recognize that we're not leaving the area between the river and the sea, and neither are the Arabs, and therefore we have to come to some kind of accommodation. But for the people who are on the genocidal from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. People that are calling for my death are actually people that are pushing the option of a resolution to the conflict further and further away. But that's the voice that we hear in European cities, often led by radical Islamists, but joined by the useful idiots from the so-called left. Now, after the attack, it was very, very clear that this was on a completely different scale. It did take a few hours. We've had, unfortunately, many waves of conflict before. I had a group that was supposed to be landing on the Sunday. They were supposed to be leaving from Los Angeles on the Saturday afternoon. And they sent me a text, well, what do you think? And when we've had previous rounds of conflict, I'd said to people, wait to the last moment, because these things can die down. We knew from the get-go that this was on a completely different scale. And as the scale of attack became clear, that we had 3,000 missiles fired in the first few hours, we had another war that lasted 11 days in which they only fired 4,000 missiles. So it was very clear that this was something different, and that this was indeed a war. And Israel begins to respond with the Air Force, which begins to bomb and to get the area ready for a ground operation that we know will come. The ground operation comes only a few weeks later. The army is completely prepared for the ground operation, and has been slowly but steadily eroding Hamas's capabilities, both in destroying its military capabilities, in capturing and destroying weapons and missiles, in killing Hamas leadership, and in destroying the underground city. It has been hampered by the fact that Hamas were holding at one point 240 hostages, many of them entirely innocent people, women, children, non-combatants, civilians, seized from their homes or seized from a party that was taking place alongside the not far from the Gaza Strip. And also by the fact that Hamas by design operates from schools, from mosques, and from hospitals. Now, I will remind you that fairly early in the conflict, a missile fired by Hamas or the Islamic Jihad lands in the parking lot of a hospital. Hamas reports that Israel has shelled a hospital. The world media buys it hook, line, and sinker. And it is later on revealed, of course, that Israel hadn't shelled, and that it was a Palestinian missile that misfired and actually hit the parking lot of the hospital and not the hospital. Now, the same world that believes Hamas's propaganda line that Israel had shelled the hospital also believes when Hamas tells us that 15 or 16,000 people have been killed, and 95% of them are children. Now, I'm not being flippant or dismissive about the loss of any innocent person, and certainly about the loss of the life of a child. But I do call into question, if our only source is Hamas's Ministry of Health, how many of those 16,000 are combatants? Is it really 16,000, or is it actually 12,000? Or is it actually 8,000? Or is it actually 20,000? How are they able to count in the conflict? We have only this week, 3 days ago, just before Shabbat, identified someone who was killed on the 7th of October. We're still counting dead people from the 7th of October, and Hamas can glibly announce names at short notice. Now, that being said, Hamas continues to use innocent people as human shields. The Red Cross, who failed at any point to report the use of the hospitals by a terror organization, the Red Cross that has failed until now to provide any visits, any medical attention, any identification of the hostages, is, of course, immediately able to condemn Israel for attacking the hospitals. Of course, if they were to read the Geneva Convention, the fourth Geneva Convention, I believe it's clause number 19, says that a hospital, once it becomes used as a military site, forgoes its being a hospital. That being said, Israel has not attacked the hospitals, but they have captured the hospitals and then gone underneath the hospitals to destroy the tunnel systems below the hospitals. At the same time as we are fighting in Gaza, there have been ongoing, and when I say ongoing, I'm talking on a daily level, skirmishes in the West Bank. In the picture, you can see Bezalel Smotrich, who is a far-right member of the coalition. He is himself a settler. He's supposedly the Minister of Finance, but his real interest is in strengthening the settlements. There has been ongoing conflict in the West Bank as well, but on a very low scale, partly because our army has intervened to prevent it from escalating, and partly because Hamas failed in their aim, or so far has failed in their aim of igniting a larger regional war. But Bezalel Smotrich that we see in the picture is a member of the coalition. The current coalition is a very, very radical coalition, governing coalition, made up of people who are there because of their interests or because of their loyalty to Netanyahu. And there was a lack of confidence in Israeli society about this government running the war, and indeed a national unity government which brought in Benny Gantz and his party into the government. They are people that are, first, with a lot of military experience. Benny Gantz was himself chief of staff, and Gadi Eisenkot, another member of his party, was also once chief of staff. And they're also motivated by professional considerations, Zionist considerations, but professional considerations, and not like members of Netanyahu's coalition, some of whom still don't seem to have understood the situation. How has Israeli society responded? In this picture, you can see my youngest son and two of his co-counselors in his youth group. Within days, when the government was not functioning, we went to a situation where ordinary Israelis gathered together to provide food and clothing to the hundreds of thousands of refugees, of displaced people. Now, they're not refugees living in tents. They're living with family members. They're living in hotels. They're living in youth hostels. The country's found solutions for them, but some of them left in their pajamas because 6:30 in the morning this event began, and they got out of there with very, very little. And in the beginning, the government was not on top of things, and civil society, the same people that were demonstrating against the government every week, pivoted to doing some of the functions of the government. Now, my son and his friends sent an announcement that to their group that they lead, 12-year-olds, 13 12-year-olds turned up with their counselors on day 4 of the war when missiles are falling to stand in a supermarket with a sign saying, please buy something. If you can, please add to your shopping basket one of the following and drop it off as you leave: tea, coffee, canned goods, rice, sugar, oil, the kind of things that you can transfer. And they collected a whole lot. And I said to him, why did you choose that particular supermarket? Like it didn't make sense. It wasn't really the one in the area where we live or where the youth group operates. Turns out that the youth groups in our city had divided the supermarkets up, established a roster of which youth group was standing at which supermarket at what time, and collecting the goods. The next stage was the councillors got together another time. These are the councillors. And divided the stuff up. So you can see them dividing tea bags up and putting them into a cup, so that there's a couple of tea bags, and each family would get a box, which would give them a few days of basic supplies. That was the initial response. And as people settled and found somewhere to stay, we went to the next level of response, which was an agricultural response. Who works in agriculture in Israel, doing the menial work? Often young Israelis, students, when they're not studying or between semesters. Lots of foreign workers and Palestinians. When the war began, many of the young Israelis were called up. Most of the foreign workers, after some of them were massacred or taken hostage, most of the foreign workers went back. And the Palestinians from the Gaza Strip absolutely couldn't come in, and most of the ones from the West Bank were also not coming into Israel. And we suddenly farmers found themselves in a situation where they were going to lose their crops and lose their economic independence, but also Israel's food security was being challenged. Remember, we're a country, we import beef and wheat. All other agricultural products are grown locally, which means when we eat a peach, it was grown locally. We can only eat it in the peach season because we're not bringing in peaches from Chile or somewhere else. But and all of a sudden, we didn't have enough people to do the work. And this is, again, my son's school, 70 kids with some teachers and parents went out to do agriculture. This was sweet potatoes, which was urgent because if the sweet potatoes are still in the ground when the rain comes, they're lost. As opposed to avocados, where we can keep picking them for a few more months. When we were picking with the school, there were a whole lot of other people picking. A couple from Washington, D.C. that were here in Israel to visit their son when the war broke out and decided to stay on and do some volunteering and help out. A woman whose husband had been called up and she had no contact with him, and she couldn't function from worry, so she came to work in the fields every day rather than to sit and fret. A man who worked in high tech and mostly from home, and who would squeeze a few hours out every day to come out and volunteer. And that is an indication of Israeli society that we were highly, highly mobilized, highly, highly motivated. People who took in to their homes people from the south, and people who took in animals from the south, sometimes animals whose families had been sent to stay in a hotel and couldn't take the pet with them, or taken hostage, or killed. And sometimes, in the case of us, a dog that was a litter of puppies had been born on an army base, and the soldiers were caring for them, on the base. But once the war began, she was completely traumatized. Every noise would freak her out. We supposedly took her to foster, but I'm happy to say that we are now a 2-dog family as opposed to a 1-dog family. Her name is Alice. And again, it's just an example of people doing what they can. Now, I mentioned not just the fighting, but also the volunteering, because Hamas operated under an assumption, which Hezbollah has used beforehand, that Israeli society, hedonistic Israeli society, is like a spider web. you can just wipe it away. We're not tough. We're not strong. We don't have staying power. That was the idea. As you can see, that is not what has happened. Because it's a small country, everyone knows someone. One of the young women murdered on the 7th of October was a graduate of my son's school. I didn't know her. She was one of 12 people from my town of Modi'in that was either killed on that day or has subsequently fallen in combat. In the first days of the war, the army limited the number of people that could go to the funeral, because there's no bomb shelters at the cemetery, and if a missile were to fall on a funeral, that would be a multiple casualty event. And so what they said was that they drew a map of the route that the family would take from their home to the cemetery, and people lined the road with flags as a mark of respect for the fallen soldier. That was initially what happened. As time went on, there were more and more people on the street, and when a woman called Norma Siano, who was a hostage from our town, murdered by Hamas, there were 10,000 people lining the streets. I want to talk about, before we go to questions, just a couple of other things. 20% of the citizens of Israel are Arabs. Most of them are Sunni Muslims. If you ask many of them, who are you? They will say, I'm a Palestinian Israeli. They hold two identities, like many of you could say you're a Jewish American. Of course, it's more complicated because just down the road is the West Bank or the Gaza Strip, where there are also Palestinians who are not Israelis. That being said, public opinion surveys have shown that Israeli Arabs are at the highest point in their identification with Israel at any point in the last 75 years. And Israeli citizens of Israel overwhelmingly reject the acts of Hamas. Now, I say highest point overwhelmingly, we're talking about more than 80%. That means that there is still sympathies, if not for the actions of Hamas, although there's that too, certainly for the ideas of Hamas. My oldest son lives in a group home, and the staff at that home are mixed, as the staff in hospitals, as the staff in supermarkets, as the staff, the people that were with me in Israel will remember the wait staff in the hotels that we ate in, or whatever it happens to be. This is a mixed society. And organizations are doing all kinds of programs, coexistence programs, to not let what is happening there spill over into the relations between Jews and Arabs in Israel. And I'm happy to say that in general, relations between Jews and Arabs are good. Would I be comfortable dressed as an Arab woman like that, walking through certain neighborhoods in Israel? Would I be comfortable as a Jew walking through certain parts, perhaps, of the old city in this heightened tension? No, but nevertheless, important to mention there are positives going on, and important to mention that Israeli Arabs think very differently than the woke crowd on campuses. I have not mentioned Hezbollah, the army of God, which sits in Lebanon and which has entered this war up to a certain point, firing missiles and anti-tank missiles as well at our forces on the northern border, disrupting life on the northern border, which has actually led to more than 100,000 people being evacuated from our northern border as well. Unlike many of the people in the south, once the war is over, they will be able to go back to their homes. Their homes are still there. Their homes were not attacked by Hamas or burnt by Hamas. But nevertheless, it is a threat. And so far, they have not crossed the threshold to an all-out war. they are a far more formidable enemy than Hamas. Hamas, like I said, has imported hardware, missiles, and weapons, but much of Hamas's arsenal is homemade, not military grade. Hezbollah, functioning in Lebanon, have got more missiles than any European country, and they're all weapons grade. So a very, very formidable threat, and it's still not clear to us how this war is going to end on the northern front, even if, and Israel has mobilized and put hundreds of thousands of soldiers on the northern front to make sure they don't get any ideas, at the same time as we're fighting much more actively in the south. I want to, we're almost at the end. I want to mention one of the suggestions I'm going to make to those of you that are not doing it is to get your media from an Israeli source. In English, there is Times of Israel, which is kind of center. There's Jerusalem Post that leans right. There's Haaretz or Ynet that lean left. Haaretz further left than Ynet. All of them will give you a much more accurate picture than the New York Times or CNN or any American media. About 2 weeks ago, there was a meeting of the Arab League and the Islamic nations. They met together and they issued a fairly harsh condemnation of Israel and called for an end of the war and for Israel to be, to cease its invasion of Gaza and its crimes against humanity and na. And your media reported it like that. Either they have no one doing research for them, or they are not interested in doing research. Because I will take you back 50 years to what the Arab League did 50 years ago. They issued a harsh, condemnatory statement against Israel, and then introduced an oil embargo that affected the gas tank of every American, of every European, of every person in the world. The Arab League made no operational decisions. That's dramatic. The reading of the situation in Israel is that the moderate Arab leaders want Hamas to be defeated, want jihadis to be defeated as they wished for ISIS to be defeated. If I drive 20 minutes from my home to Ben Gurion Airport, I can fly to anywhere in the world. If I have a ticket on El Al, on Arkia, which is an Israeli low-cost airline, or on Israel, which is an Israeli low-cost airline. Every other country cut its flights to Israel, except for Fly Dubai and Emirates that have been flying daily out of Israel throughout the war. More than that, Saudi Arabia has been shooting down, not just warning us, but actively shooting down missiles fired from Yemen by the Houthis onto Israel. Now, none of us know how this war is going to end, but we know for sure one thing, that the Middle East that existed on the 6th of October is not the Middle East that exists right now. That was just to say the Saudis have been involved in doing something different, and there you can see my email address. If you don't manage to write it down, you can always get it from Rabbi, from Suzanne, from Teresa. That many of you have know how to be in contact with me, and I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'll be happy to take any questions. Is someone moderating the question? Oh, Teresa's got a question, so you go ahead.
Of course, Teresa has the question. it's kind of two parts, but they go together, and they have to do with Netanyahu. What I'm hearing is he's not terribly popular. He's failed to apologize, as all the other generals have and intelligence has. Some people say, oh, you're never going to get him out of there. But what was happening this week? Like yesterday, Netanyahu did a press conference, and the news there was making a big deal over the fact, I think it was Gallant. Was it Gallant who refused to meet with him, but did his own press conference? What's being said of how the emergency cabinet is functioning together?
Okay, so Netanyahu was unpopular before the war. In other words, he had a very narrow coalition of 64 people out of 120. He rested on some very radical groups, the hard right and the ultra-Orthodox, was passing or trying to pass a very radical overhaul of the court system. And every opinion poll and weekly opinion polls for like 30 weeks showed that he would not be able to make a coalition were elections to be held. Subsequent to the war, his popularity has plummeted even further, to the extent that if he currently has 64, which means the opposition have 56, the opposition would have, the people currently in the opposition would have 75 were an election to be held today. So his party would, so there would not be a government, or would not be the current government. But of course, your system, you know when your next election is. Our system, we know when our next election has to be by, but it could be at any stage before then. So the question is, are there 5 brave men or women in the coalition who, when the war is over, in a vote of no confidence, would not vote with the government, forcing them to not have a majority and for us to go to elections? We don't know. We know that there's an enormous amount of rage against the government, including in some circles that up until now were government loyalists. You can't switch drop from 64 to 45 seats, a third of your seats, if people are satisfied. The National Unity Government have said from the get-go, we're only here till the war is over. Because right now the government is not 64. Right now the government has another almost 20 people in it, while we're fighting the war. But the day the war is over, they're going to leave. The Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant, who is popular and is seen by Israelis as being one of the ministers that was functional from the moment the war began, and someone who is doing his job and doing his job well, is a member of Netanyahu's party. But I think he's finding a lot more common ground with the members of the opposition in the war cabinet, because they're making professional decisions and not ideological decisions. There are all kinds of rumors about other people that will vote against the government when push comes to shove, but we don't know. What we do know is that the whole country, everything was suspended for some things for the first few days, some things for the first few weeks, and some things for 2 months. But as of this week, Netanyahu's trial continues. He is under indictment for fraud, bribery, and breach of trust. Those are big cases. And the cases are continuing now. He doesn't need personally to be present in the courtroom, so the war, so the war effort can continue. Golda Meir didn't survive 73. She also didn't go the day after the war ended. It took a while till she went, but she went. And the sense is that there's no way that he can come back from even Netanyahu, who has been Mr. Teflon and who has come back time and nothing has stuck, that this is just too big. And the anger and the rage against him. Now, to be absolutely clear, there were a series of failures. There was a conceptual failure. There were intelligence failures. There were failures in not having enough soldiers on the Gaza Strip because they let a whole lot go home because it was Simchat Torah and there should have been more that were kept back, and a whole lot of failures. But there was also the failure of someone who for 12 years emphasized making peace with the Gulf states, which is important, and making peace with Morocco, which is important, and making peace with Sudan, and so on and so on and so on, and ignoring the problem that was festering right under our noses of working out some kind of resolution with the Palestinians. And so the overall responsibility for the overview and for the people that he appointed, and he appointed many people into positions out of loyalty, not out of professionalism, and too many people think that he cannot go. So I think he will go. I don't think he will nice and neatly announce the day the war ends, I'm resigning, but I think he will be pushed. Other questions? Carol.
What is happening for the ordinary? You say things are getting somewhat back to normal. What about school? What about the public utilities, the functioning of government, the economy, which has been severely disrupted, particularly when you take a lot of people out of it to be on a war footing?
Okay, so that's a great question, because we're a tiny country, but we're not a monolithic country. So the area in the north and the south where the people were evacuated, they have re-established schools in the hotels or wherever the families that have been have been evacuated to are currently living, temporary schools. Now, that didn't happen immediately. It took a while. The first week, the whole country was on Zoom school. The second week in my town, high school kids were back at school 4 days a week. Why only 4 days a week? Because the shelters couldn't really cope with all the kids being in them at once. The week afterwards, elementary school, middle school, and elementary went back, and already for 2 weeks in my town, there's regular school, regular time, entirely normal. The youth group could meet as long as there was a parent standing outside with a gun. Services, you couldn't go to services unless you had an armed guard at services. In Tel Aviv, in Modi'in, miles from the front, just an extra layer of awareness, an extra layer of concern. And we actually had an inspection. People who arrived at our synagogue to check that we had an armed guard, people from the civil security, from the civil guard, who came to check that we had an armed guard at our service. Those things are being rolled back where I live, in Modi'in. In other parts of the country, they're still there. And in some parts of the country, which, like the area around Caesarea, which is kind of not really in the range of the north or the south, things function from very, very early. Netanya, Caesarea, those places went back to being normal very, very quickly. Regarding the economy, there are 360,000 people doing reserves. That means university semester has not yet opened. It was supposed to open on the 12th of October, the 11th of October, whatever the Sunday is around about then. 14, whatever it was. So universities has not opened because who are the reservists? Overwhelmingly, young people in that age. All of the reservists are not at work. And then there are entire branches like tourism, which are barely functioning. We're having the handful of solidarity trips coming through, but not really a significant amount of work. There are, we were mentioning before, the supermarkets are full. And if in the first few days people were panic buying, you can remember in the beginning of COVID, and everyone was buying toilet paper or whatever. So in the first few days, people were doing shopping, to kind of stock up at home. But very quickly the supermarket stabilized. We can get just about everything in the supermarket. But the mall, people don't feel like going shopping. You're going to go buy, your latest fashionable outfit. Well, maybe you got a bar mitzvah that's still going to happen, or a family, event that's still going to happen. But, there's been a drop in general commercial activity across the whole country. It took the government a few weeks to begin to have payouts, Social Security, to the displaced people who, like I said, in some cases, their houses no longer exist if it's in the south, because Hamas burnt their houses down and they have nothing. Or in other cases, they left fleeing terrorists, wearing whatever they were wearing. It took the government a few weeks to give those people support. They're not yet providing support to other branches. For example, bus drivers, tour guides. Other sectors have not yet received any support from the government at this point. Utilities are functioning. The country, the core of the country has managed to function all the way through. Trains have run, buses have run, schedules have been disrupted, in some cases. In our town, even the coffee shops and the fast food places and the restaurants are open. People don't really have a party atmosphere, but if you've got to have a business meeting and you're going to have it, at a coffee shop rather than in a dry office, those. The other morning I met a colleague for coffee, 2 blocks from my house, and I was the first time I did it, and I was kind of surprised about how many other people were there. And I think maybe I was surprised because because of the war, have not been working. So I've been very kind of immersed in the war and going to volunteer. And I'm now an expert in, are we doing potatoes, or are we doing zucchini, or are we doing avocados, or are we doing olives? I've got my broad repertoire of agricultural experience already. And some, in many ways, also more immersed in the war. As I've got friends that on day 2 or day 3 started going, once kind of things settled, started going back to the office, started going back and doing what they were doing, because the economy has to keep functioning for the day after the war. It's not just the agricultural products that have to be brought back, but the people, when they come back from reserves, need to have the companies they worked for still need to be functioning so that they can go back to those jobs. Marcia, yeah.
Okay. So given your personal crystal ball, how do you see the war evolving and the world pressure to stop happening? What do you see? How do you see this moving?
So I don't have a crystal ball, but I can tell you that in 2014, it would have been a lot easier for Israel to destroy is a big word, but to destroy Hamas's capabilities, which is what they're trying to do now. And they didn't do it because there was an assessment that it was going to cost the lives of 500 soldiers to carry that out. And it seemed like a very heavy price to pay. The assessment before this operation was that it was going to cost a lot more lives than that. And the Israeli public overwhelmingly felt it was a price that we had to pay. So Israel is very, very determined that we cannot continue to live with Hamas empowered, with Hamas capable on our border. Because if we do on the border with the Gaza Strip, then there will be Hamas-like people on the Lebanese border and on the Syrian border and on the Jordanian border and on the West Bank border. And all of us live close to a border. There's almost no one in Israel that's not living within a few miles of a border. The army, we've paid in lives of, again, I want to be respectful. I don't remember the exact number, if it's 60 or 70, but that's the ballpark of people that have fallen in combat. Each one a whole world, as everyone who's lost is a whole world. But the army has actually been pleased by the low casualty rate that we have had in the war phase. The army is trying to do two things. It's trying to degrade Hamas significantly, and it's trying to bring back the hostages. And there are those who say at a certain point they're going to have to make a decision between which of those two they do. There are other voices who say that the more we put pressure on Hamas, the more it will be prepared to negotiate, because their last shield is the hostages. There's another voice that says, who are you kidding? Most of them are dead. We know, and the army has actually announced in the last week 5 or 6 of them as being dead, based on intelligence that they got from some of the returning hostages. But we don't know. There was a story of a husband and a wife that were taken captive, and when she was released, she didn't even know that her husband had been held as a hostage. They'd never seen each other because they're being held all over the place. The support of President Biden, the support of the American government, the support of the German government, the support of a handful of other governments so far has, and by the way, all of the moderate Arab countries. The old paradigm of this is a Jewish-Arab war, which is still the way much of your media reports it, doesn't work anymore. Now, they're not democracies. I don't know what the rank and file, what the people in the street think in many of these Arab countries, but we know what their leaders think. And right now there is support for Israel to continue the war. And I think that the public are interested in Hamas continuing to be far more significantly degraded, because if they are not, then the war on the northern front is a guarantee. If Hamas is degraded enough, then there may not be a war on the northern front. And we were lucky, and I use this word guardedly, but we were lucky that the attack was carried out by Hamas and not by Hezbollah. Hezbollah are several levels higher militarily, equipment-wise, scale than Hamas. They are battle-hardened from years of fighting in the Syrian civil war. It will be a completely different kettle of fish unless they can see that it's not worth their while to go to war with us. And so voices that are calling for a ceasefire in Gaza are actually calling for another war in the north. And it's a very sobering thought. I'm not saying this glibly and happily, but I'm saying that if we are unable to not deter, because deter didn't work. There was a ceasefire in effect until 6:29 a.m. on the 7th of October. A ceasefire is not good enough. There needs to be something different for those families to go back to live in the kibbutzim around Gaza. We stood for a few hours in Kfar Aza, those that were with me on the last trip. And on the trip before that, we stood on the northern border. Would we be confident to stand in a place like that now? Would people be confident to go back and live in Kfar Aza if this reality is not significantly changed? So this is not an existential war like 1973 was, where we questioned whether Israel was going to survive, like literally be destroyed. But it's an existential war, because if the war ends where we can't live within a few miles of our borders in this tiny country, then that's existential as well. And so, you know, I've spent my life in the peace camp, and I still see myself in the peace camp. And the day after the war, I live between the river and the sea, and so do the Palestinians live between the river and the sea. And we are going to have to try something else, because the models that have tried have not worked. But in order to try something else, we need to create a different reality in Israel right now. A different reality between Israel and allowing the moderates to come in. Now, criticism of the Prime Minister, this is a long answer, but criticism of the Prime Minister is that he's not presenting a vision for what will be afterwards. And one of the reasons he's not presenting a vision for what will be afterwards is because what America wants as a vision, his radical right partners couldn't live with. And what his radical right partners want as a vision, President Biden couldn't live with. So he's not really saying anything right now, trying to keep going for as long as possible. But it's important to remember that a future peacekeeping force, a future demilitarized force, a future Marshall Plan to rebuild the devastation in Gaza could now involve the Gulf states, could now involve the Moroccans, could now involve Arab countries. And that opens a whole lot of different possibilities for what could be created here when the war is over. But that's, at this point, you know, wishful thing. I mean, we don't know, because we don't know when the war is over. Is the war over? You know, I kind of, my October group's canceled, then my November group's canceled, then my December group's canceled. Now in January, I've got, which was quiet month, I've got a solidarity group booked. But if things don't change in the next couple of weeks, my February groups are going to cancel. I mean, that's the cycle we're working on. No one knows yet when it's going to end. Last question from Teresa.
Yeah, with regard to Netanyahu, here in the States, we are hearing about his plans for the day after. And it is upsetting some people, because and what we're hearing is him say that Israel has to go in. There's no other group that's capable of going in for an indeterminate time and controlling Gaza. And that rings a lot of alarm bells for a lot of people. So, I mean, that's what we're hearing. Wasn't it a few days ago? Was it Galant?
But that's not, in other words, Israel is going to be in control when Hamas are gone. But what happens the day after that? America was in control at the end of World War II in Germany. But then what? And that's where he's not voicing what it is. And is Israel going to be patrolling in the streets? Or is the Palestinian Authority going to be patrolling the streets? Or is an international peacekeeping force going to be patrolling the streets? Or is NATO going to be patrolling the streets? One thing we know, nature abhors a vacuum, and the Middle East abhors a vacuum even more. And if there is no one there, it's always the bad guys. It's always, you tried it in, America tried it in, when they got rid of Saddam Hussein, and who arrived? ISIS or Al-Qaeda. The idea of radical jihadism, whether it's Hamas or Al-Qaeda or ISIS, is still there. It's there, but they cannot be the people in power. And for them not to be the people in power, someone else has to be in power. We have to, as Israel, we have to approve of whoever's going to be in power. But in the long term, it can't be us. In the long term, it can't be us, because I don't think Israeli, we tried that. We were in power there from 1967 until the 90s, and it didn't. It's clearly not something that most Israelis wanted then or want now. Before I hand over to Suzanne or the rabbi who was going to talk, we will have in 3 more meetings, like later on in the year, and we can certainly, not later on in the year, in the new year, and we can certainly, carry on. There'll be an agenda and there'll be structure, but there'll also always, of course, be time for more questions. But it is 12:30 in the night now, so I don't think we're going to keep going much longer. Rabbi.
I just want to say thank you so much for making this time for us and allowing us the opportunity to get a lot more clarity. There's a lot of information going around and a lot of disinformation going around. I would love if you have other suggestions for news sources other than the Times of Israel that you want to share. I know I have a lot of people asking, especially now, questioning about what's going on in the West Bank in addition to Gaza, and wanting to learn more about some of the policies. So I would love if there's a great resource that we don't know about yet. But we're really looking forward to getting more of that background when we meet with you, I think in February. So we wish you a lot of chizuk, a lot of strength to you, to your family, to all those who are going through what, even if it's going back to the regular life, it's not regular life. As you said, it's not anything like it was on October 6th. So I know a lot of us.
I'll send you a list of potential links.
Thank you.
That you can forward. And I want to say I live in the city of Modi'in. So our holiday is just a few days away. Hanukkah happened in Modi'in. It's a big deal. It's like a Christian living in Bethlehem. Hanukkah in Modi'in, it's the place to be. So we are hoping, that it will bring some light to us as we go forward. And I'll take this opportunity to wish all of you as well, Festival of Light, Chag Hanukkah Sameach, and I look forward to being in contact again with you in February, and the dates that the rabbi and I have agreed on, but I don't remember offhand.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, have a good day.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Golly.